Welcome to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. We have two new Cleveland Indians / Guardians going into the Hall of Fame. One, CC Sabathia. The other, the great longtime voice of the now Guardians, Tom Hamilton. I love Tom Hamilton. He's as good as it gets. We're going to talk with Tom today. Can't wait. That's coming up next in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
You're watching Adam the Bull on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, welcome back to the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, and we're thrilled to be joined by the legendary voice of the Cleveland Guardians. And this year, we'll go into the Hall of Fame as one of the newest members, along with a guy he called a ton of games for in CC Sabathia. The great Tom Hamilton is with us. Tom, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
Oh, Adam, thanks for having me. Yeah, honored to be with you. Good to see your smiling face again. And yeah, it's pretty surreal. So happy for CC and Amber and that great family of theirs. And, it's funny. I got to do his first game in 2001 when he was a rookie on that ball club and would have been the rookie of the year, except there was this player coming from Japan named Ichiro. And ironically, he and Ichiro go into the Hall of Fame now together. You know,
I heard CC being interviewed on MLB radio, and then we had him as a guest on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And both times he said that he was excited that you were going in the same year as him. What was your relationship like with CC?
Really good. Hopefully you have a good relationship with all your players. At least I try to. And but some you have a better relationship with. It's called life. And if you didn't like CC, then you needed to look in the mirror because the problem would be staring back at you. I just am always been so impressed with what kind of a man he is. And, he married his high school sweetheart, Amber. And I'll tell you what, Bull, she's as big a part of this as CC. She may not have pitched an inning, but she was his support through, their young years when they were growing up, and like all of us that are youngsters trying to figure out life. And, they have had a great marriage and they have a great family. And I just couldn't be happier because I've always said CC's one of those guys. We've had a number of these guys in my 35 years, whether it's Charlie Nagy, whether it's Sandy Alomar, whether it's Paul Sorrento. CC Sabathia is another one. I think of Mike Napoli. I think of Jason Giambi. I think of Marquise Grissom. Guys that were as good a teammate as a guy would ever play with. Jim Tomey's in that group as well. I don't want to start. You name people and you forget people.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Those are the guys that were colorblind. Didn't matter if you were black, white, had purple polka dots. Those guys treated you as a great teammate. And, anybody that played with CC will tell you he's as probably as good a teammate as they've ever had. And, for him to go in the first ballot, I think is richly deserved. And he'll go in as a Yankee. We get it. But boy, his numbers, Bull, were every bit as comparable in New York as they were in Cleveland. He just happened to pitch a few more years in New York, but what you can never take away, he got his one Cy Young Award here in Cleveland. And, I think we were about as close to winning a World Series in 2007 as we've ever been. And, had the 3-1 lead with Boston. And if CC was another year older, he would have won that deciding game and put you to the World Series. He just was young and tried to do too much, but I couldn't be happier for him.
When I started my radio career, I was doing play-by-play for the Batavia Muck Dogs of the New York Penn League. And I remember I guess it had to be, I now can't remember which of my 3 years. I think it was 99, right? 99, 2000, 2001. Yeah. I think in 99, CC was pitching for the Mahoney Valley Scrappers. Yep. And not that I'm a scout or anything, but watching him pitch against our team, and we had Marlon Byrd, who of course was a good major leaguer. Watching CC pitch against our team, I was like, oh, this guy's different than the rest of the guys pitching in the minors. It really stood out, even at that age when he was, 18, 19 years old.
his physicality, Bull.
Yeah.
I mean, most 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids aren't that big. You know, I mean, you can see why he had a scholarship from the University of Hawaii to play tight end. You know, he was a really good athlete. And I think people, I always get a kick out of this because we're so quick to want to label or predict, oh boy, if CC doesn't lose some weight, you know, it's going to really shorten his career. And it's like, that was really an accurate statement, wasn't it? Because that's what made him impactful. You know, the great pitchers, those that last a long time, they last because of their waist down. It's all about their legs and their ability to drive off that mound to, you know, you can't just stand there and throw a ball with your arm. You better have your lower body involved. And he was very good at that. And I think the other thing too, Bull, he made adjustments along the way. That first start he made against the Baltimore Orioles, his first 27 pitches in the first inning were fastballs. He was 98, 99. He was so pumped up. And, you know, at the end of his career, he was throwing 88 to 90, but he was still getting people out because he could change speeds. He developed a cutter. He knew how to pitch, and he still had that physical presence. He always had a physical presence. There's a reason why, not that you can't be successful being under 6 feet, being a pitcher, but you look at the superstars, there are very few Pedro Martinez who haven't been physical pitchers that lasted a long time.
It's a great point. Tom, I remember as a kid, if you grew up a baseball fan, especially if you're at least 35, 40, I think everybody has memories of listening to baseball on the radio. It's different than any other sport, in my opinion. I couldn't, like, I don't remember listening to football on the radio as a kid or basketball. Maybe I just didn't do it, but I don't remember that. But I can tell you that as a Cubs fan in New York, I would listen to the Mets games, but then when the Cubs would play in Philly, I'd listen to Harry Callis from 1210 WCAU. Like, people remember these things, the radio stations they listen to, the connection between the play-by-play man on radio specifically for baseball and the fans, even though it's probably changed somewhat over the years, I think is unlike any other relationship between a play-by-play person and a fan. Do you think that that's true?
Yeah. And I think, and I've been asked this a lot, Bull, and, I'm very much like you now. I'm obviously older. So part of why I listen to maybe more football and basketball on the radio growing up is because their games weren't on TV. I mean, even Bull, when I started in 1990 with the Indians, maybe there were 60, 75 games televised. That was it.
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't have the cell phone that, our younger generation pretty much watches so many of their events on the phone. But nonetheless, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. And that is, one, the time of the year. Yeah. If you're in the Midwest, or in your case, growing up in the East, I mean, you were cooped up a lot of the winter, or you were inside a lot more than you would be if you were, say, living, in a sunshine state or out west. Sure. Summer comes around, you're not going to be cooped up watching a game every day for 6 months. And that's why the radio has been such a great partner. You can go to your son's Little League game and tune it in, going and coming from the game. Or, I see people golfing now all the time that, are listening to a ball game coming from their phone on the golf cart, while they're golfing, or you're at the lake, or whatever the case might be. We relish those summer months in the Midwest. And that's where I think baseball has maintained such a great relationship with its audience on the radio. Now, none of us, or at least I would hope, any of us that are doing games think that anyone sitting in their house listening to every word we say for 3 hours every day. That's ego talking, if you are. And which is why you always tell young broadcasters, you better not go more than 2 minutes without giving the score and inning, because that's how people are tuning in and tuning out. So I think weather has played a lot, the time of the year that we're involved, the fact that it's every day, Bull. Let's face it, there's some great football broadcasters, and
Sure.
we've been blessed in Cleveland with the Nev Chandlers and Casey Coleman and Jim Donovan. And, Paul Keels does such a phenomenal job with Ohio State. But football is such an event. You'll set aside those 3 hours to watch the game unless you're driving or whatnot. And then they're great companions. So I think that's the advantage that we have. And even during the NBA season, the kind of January Cleveland's had, you're home at night. So, but we've got a great one doing those two and Tim Alcorn. So we've been really blessed that way. I think in Cleveland, some of the guys I have so much admiration for, including Timmy and Joe Tate and so many others. But I think we're a benefactor of the time of year, Bull.
Yeah. And the great thing about radio, too, from a broadcaster's perspective is that, now if you're a baseball play-by-play, if you're Matt Underwood, well, when the Guardians go to the playoffs, you're out. Yeah. It stinks. But obviously, you're calling these World Series games, I love that. And fans want to hear you. The Guardians fans don't really, it's no offense to Joe Buck, and I know a lot got made out of the 2016 World Series, but they want to hear their guys. Yeah. They want to hear Tom Hamilton. So I think there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. And you know what? Every sport's that way. I do. I empathize with our TV broadcasters because, look, when you get into this business, you want to be able to call big games.
Sure.
Not so much for your own ego, but everybody wants to be at a big game. They want to watch a big game. If you're a broadcaster, you want to broadcast the big games. You want to see if you can match up to the moment. And you've been there all year. You're vested like our TV folks are. And that is hard, but it's been that way forever, Bull. Mm-hmm. And it's that way come the NBA, come the NFL. I mean, if the Browns get to the Super Bowl or the Cavs get to the NBA Finals, Timmy will be calling those games in June if the Cavs' magical season continues to the NBA championship. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way it's always been. And that going in.
When you do you have anybody helping you with your Hall of Fame speech, or is that a solo thing you're working on?
I'll ask my wife, can you make me a cocktail? That might knock the edge off and maybe it will help me think a little bit better. Honestly,
yeah.
And my wife, Wendy, was in radio and TV for a long time as a newscaster and a news reporter. And she's such a great asset and has been not only as a wife and a mother, but to have somebody that knows the profession. She's a good person to critique. Yeah, I mean, there have been nights I've come home and she heard some of the broadcasts. Now, trust me, when I say no one's listening to every word, my wife is at the top of the list. She's not going to listen to me for 3 hours. She can get enough of me during the day, but she's been very good about saying, hey, I caught this ending or that ending. Remember, we still have 3 kids to get through college. Watch what you say. And, you would always take that advice because she knew what she was talking about.
Oh,
but
that's funny.
She'll be a sounding board on that.
Yeah.
Adam, I know people, I'll tell you what's been harder, Adam.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into the weeds on this with the Hall of Fame, but you're only allowed to invite certain amount of people for certain events. Or some events some of your guests can come to. Then you have to have another list where not all of them can get to this, but they can get to this. And it's like, we have 4 children. And it's like trying to pick your favorite child. Well, you don't have a favorite child. You love them all equally. And that's been more stressful. I'll get at that speech at the end of the day. We're just very grateful for the life we've had. And I've said it, Bull, and I'll say it again and again. 2 things. One, we got so fortunate to get hired by Cleveland. It was an incredible place to raise our children, as you now know, raising your son. It's as good a community to raise a family as there is in the country. And I don't care what anyone says. And I'm glad not everybody agrees with that, because then we're not swamped like we're out here in Arizona right now. And I mean, I don't know how, pretty soon Phoenix is going to, southern border will be Tijuana and its northern border will be Utah. I mean, Phoenix just keeps blowing up. And the other thing is, the fan base in Cleveland's passionate. They care. And the worst thing you can do is go to a market where there's apathy. There might be people that love you. I know there might be every bit as many people that can't stand the broadcast. I get those letters, but at least they're listening. At least they care. And that, what you don't want is apathy. So, that speech will include how much the community has meant to us.
It's a great point. I moved to Cleveland to work in radio in 2011. And when I first moved here, honestly, and I've said this to I never thought I'd spend the rest of my career in Cleveland. I had just turned 40 and I was like, okay, I got one more move to a bigger market. But after a while, I was like, I really like it here. My wife really likes it here. My wife refers to Cleveland as user friendly. It's just, and now I can't imagine moving. I'm like, okay, we're going to live here the rest of our lives. And as you said, it's probably like there's no traffic or almost no traffic. And Cleveland's a big city compared to most cities in America, not compared to New York or Boston, but compared to most cities in America, it's a big city. And yet you don't have to deal with any traffic. It's easy to get around, especially on the west side. It's so easy to get around. And that's awesome.
I get a kick out of I'll come home or go to the ballpark, based on the time of the day. If it's a day game and you got to deal with morning rush hour, and I'll be like, oh my Lord, how do people do this every day? And then somebody will say, well, how long did it take you? Well, about 5 minutes longer than normal, So it's like, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. But are any of your kids getting involved in broadcasting?
Well, Bradley is a news reporter for Channel 8 in Cleveland. And so Bradley and Brittany and our two grandsons are still in Cleveland. Yeah. Nick, our other son, both played at Kent State and then played in the minors. Nick is still in baseball. He's a scout with the Kansas City Royals. Oh, that's awesome. And he and his wife are based out in Nashville. So he's an amateur scout, meaning he's scouting college and high school kids for the upcoming draft. And so he's got a really good territory down there with parts of Georgia and Tennessee and Kentucky where there's obviously good baseball being played. And then our two daughters are now both in Denver. They're not in broadcasting, and they were the smart ones, So.
Well, now your son's working for the Royals, so there's a little bit of a rivalry there. Sure. But battling for this division. That's got to be because they probably grew up, of course, rooting for the Indians.
Yeah. And you know what? The Royals have been so good to Nick. He had started his scouting career with the Royals in 2016 after his minor league career ended. Mm-hmm. And obviously we got to the World Series and games 6 and 7 were in Cleveland. And at that time he was based out of Atlanta, and the Royals were like, hey, Nick, you're suspended, so to speak, for the next 4 days. Get back to Cleveland and watch the club that you grew up rooting for, the club you played in the minor leagues for 3 years for. You need to be there for games 6 and 7, which tells you a lot about the Royals organization. And then, there's so much, the two organizations, Cleveland and Kansas City, are so much alike in that they have great people that own the clubs. You are not going to meet better people than the Dolan family in Cleveland or Mr. Sherman and his group in Kansas City. They have great front offices. They allow their people to do their jobs. There's so many similarities. If he's not working for the Guardians, he couldn't be working for an organization I think more highly of than the Royals.
Yeah, in this division, I mean, the Guardians have a good team. The Royals have a good team. I like what the Tigers look like. This division, the Twins are always competitive. We know the White Sox are what they are right now. They're a mess. Yeah. But the rest of this division is probably, as a group, as competitive as it's been in a long time.
I would say, Bull, when you think of this division, and in essence, it was kind of like 94 is when it started, because it was Cleveland and the really good White Sox team that were duking it out for the division title before the strike. The one downside to the division, when you think of it over the last, 30 years, there haven't been a ton of great races or great rivalries within the division because, Cleveland has won the most division titles, Minnesota the second most, then Detroit. but at no time were those overlapping. It just
Right.
seemed like for a while Cleveland dominated. And then all of a sudden Minnesota was dominant. And then Detroit with their run with Cabrera and those guys was dominant. And obviously the Royals won the World Series, but the Royals have only won the division title one time, Bull, and that was the year they won the World Series. And the White Sox have, had their moments. Obviously, they won the World Series too back in 2005. But this, we saw it last year. And to your point, we're going to see it again this year. This is legitimately, in my mind, a 4-team race. We had 3 teams in the playoffs last year. That's never happened before.
No.
And I think this division's really going to beat up each other here this season. This will be interesting.
Yeah, I've been trying to, obviously there's a lot of time before the season starts, but I've been trying to decide who, I think the favorite is in the division. And I've really gone back and forth. I like that the Tigers signed Jack Flaherty. I think that's a good move. They've been connected to Bregman. I think if they sign Bregman to have that veteran, I think they're missing that veteran piece in that lineup. Yeah. I actually like the Gleyber Torres signing for them for 1 year. I think that was a good move.
I think Detroit, I'm curious to see, Adam, will they have a market correction? I felt like that was us in 23, where 22, we kind of came out of nowhere. And then 23, there were a lot of injuries. Some guys didn't play as well. What Detroit did people maybe don't remember. We were in Detroit at the trading deadline. Jack Flaherty was supposed to pitch against us on the day game getaway, and they pulled him.
Yeah.
And we were all like, well, I think we know what that means. By 4:30 this afternoon, Jack Flaherty's pitching for somebody else, which in the end, he got traded to the Dodgers. Yeah. They had raised the white flag, so to speak, on their season. And rightfully so. I thought what they were doing was the right thing. What they did then those last 2 months is unprecedented. And how they did it was just incredible. And they obviously had us on the ropes. If David Fry doesn't come off the bench, we are 7 outs away from losing in the first round to Detroit.
Yep.
And they had all that momentum. And, David Fry changed October for us with that pinch hit home run. And then, of course, Game 5 the next day, Lane Thomas with the grand slam off Tarek Skubal. That's how close the Tigers were to playing for a berth in the World Series. There's no way they can replicate what they did over the last 2 months because you wouldn't have a bullpen left.
Sure.
Now, though, they have confidence. But as you and I both know in sports, Adam, now you're the hunted. We'll see how they react instead of being the hunter.
Yeah.
I still think they're a really good ball club. I think they've got really good young players, but growth is not linear when it comes to improving in baseball. I'm not totally sold on the Tigers yet. I think they're really good, but the team that would concern me more than anybody in the division right now is Kansas City. I just think Kansas City is, they've added, Jonathan India, who I think will really help their offense. Yeah. They've gone out and they've kept their starting pitching. They've made additions. The Royals, they were good last year from really start to finish. And I just, and you mentioned them, Minnesota is still a really talented ball club. They just can't stay healthy. I don't know what the deal is there, but, the guys that they've given big money to have had a history of being injured, and you don't get healthier as you get older. No. So I still think, though, all 4 teams are legitimate playoff contenders, with exception, of course, the White Sox.
Right. You can't even imagine how good Byron Buxton could be if that guy could play all seast. He's so talented.
And Royce Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Carlos Correa is good when he's healthy, but that's the old adage, you're not helping your ball club from the training table, and it's every year with them. So I don't know why this year would be different.
I really want the Guardians to get one more bat, Tom. I don't think I'm not
I agree.
Sure they're going to do it. They're probably not, but they need that one more.
I agree.
I wanted the Guardians to sign Gleyber Torres, especially once they traded him. I don't remember the timeline, but I think they need one more power bat for that lineup. I'd love to see him get it. I will see. I'm hopeful, but I'm obviously the bullpen's great. The rotation, if Bieber can get healthy.
Yeah.
But I'm worried about the lineup a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you haven't replaced 30 and 100. You know, whatever people want to say about Josh Naylor, for 2 years, he drives in 100. Now, he didn't drive in 100 2 years ago because he missed 4 weeks there at the end of the year, or he drives in 100. You know, 30 and 100 is hard to find, especially as we have seen in Cleveland. I mean, that used to be the norm back in the mid-90s. Now it's the exception. And the one thing, Bull, that I think was very evident last year, they had to pitch to Jose Ramirez, especially the first half of the year, because Josh Naylor was just killing people and making them pay for pitching around Jose Ramirez. Somebody has got to be able to protect Jose Ramirez, or he'll lead the league in intentional walks again. But more importantly, it's not giving him anything to hit. And then does he get impatient? Does he expand the strike zone? Does he try to do too much because he's not getting strikes to swing at? It can have that, ripple down effect. So, another bat would be huge. I know that bat could be Chase DeLauder, but even if it is Chase DeLauder, he's still a kid.
Yeah.
And, it takes a while in this league to be a bona fide middle of the order hitter, as we have seen. Look how much better Josh Naylor was last year than he was when we got him from San Diego. So I'm with you. And, but the one thing I do, I have such great faith in Chris and in Cherney, and for obvious reasons. But it's just, to me, pretty hard to comprehend what they have done in we've been in the playoffs 7 times now since 2013.
Unreal.
And in the last 30 years, this club's been in the playoffs 14 times. It's basically every year we go to spring training with a legitimate chance to play in October. Yeah. And that just doesn't happen in the market with the revenue challenges that Cleveland has.
Yeah. And it's possible in the next couple of years that Manzardo, Bazzana, and DeLauder are all all-star caliber players.
Right.
But, we shall see. Last thing, Tom, before we wrap up, I think with you going into the Hall of Fame, I've said this before, but what I love and respect about your calls of the games so much is that, at least for me, I don't know if every fan cares about this. When I listen to a broadcast of my team, and even though I grew up a Cubs fan and 2016 was quite awkward, I love the Guardians now. I've lived here a while. I want them to win. I want them to win a World Series. So when I listen to you on the radio, and when I listen to anybody on the radio, what I personally am looking for a home team broadcaster is, I want to know that broadcaster wants my team to win, but will be fair about the call and not be a homer on every bad call. And I think you nail that, which is not an easy line to hit.
Thank you.
Better than anybody I've heard. You obviously want the Guardians to win. It's clear. But when they play crappy, or when there's a bad call in the Guardians' favor, you call it out. And I love that. I think that's great.
Well, I appreciate it. That means a lot, Bull. And, in this business, once you've lost credibility, you're done. If your audience doesn't believe you, and John Miller had said once to me, look, if every play by your club's a great play, then when the great play does happen, your audience is like, whatever. This guy says every 12 hopper to the shortstop was an incredible play by Omar Vizquel to make it. And I've also been blessed, Adam, from the standpoint the ball club has realized credibility is critical to the audience believing and accepting you. Now, without question, we all make mistakes. I've stepped over the line sometimes where I've listened back and I went, you know what, I went one step too far. And yet you never hear from the ball club, hey, you can't say this, you can't. I know broadcasters in our business that if they tell the broadcaster, you must say it's a sunny day, and you say to your ownership, but it's 10 o'clock at night, and they say, I don't care, you're going to say it's a sunny day. I don't have that. The ball club has been so good and again, I think it started with the Jacobs family, and it's carried on with the Dolan family, in that we've hired you to do a job. We're not micromanaging you. If something needs to be said, it'll be said. But they let you do your job. They trust you to use your judgment, even though I have made mistakes, in which there are always things when you go live for 3 hours that you wish you could take back, or maybe it's coming out of your mouth and you're like, oh no. But again, I also want to be a fan of the game, Bull. And, and I know people hate this. I'll guarantee you, Bull, and I'm going on a diatribe now. There are a lot of fans in Cleveland that say we will never have a Cleveland pitcher throw a no-hitter until this clown retires, because I refuse to be caught up in the superstition of there has never been a no-hitter thrown where that night the pitcher after the game said, I want to thank the radio broadcaster for never mentioning no-hitter. Ernie Harwell told me a long time ago, we have nothing to do with what's going on in the field. What you and I talked about before, people are listening every 2-3 minutes, maybe leaving the car and coming back in. If you're making them guess what's going on, you're not doing your job. And so I just believe in credibility so much that, to me, it's just like trust in a marriage. If you break that trust in your marriage, you're forever harmed by it. And if you lose credibility with your audience, I don't know how you get it back.
There's no broadcaster jinx, people. Don't be crazy. Tom is not costing. And because there's no hitter, Tom, we get to keep talking about Len Barker.
Bingo.
Every year, right? Tom, you're the best. Thank you for I took so much of your time, and I really appreciate it.
I'm a big fan. I'm really honored that you would have me on. Thanks so much, Adam. And you tell your boy to keep swinging. You know what? On-base percentage is overrated. Knicks still love the long ball. So.
He does not walk. He is not a walker. He is hacking away. Thanks for joining us, Tom. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bull.
Just phenomenal. Nothing better than talking with Tom Hamilton. He is amazing. Love listening to him. Love talking with him. Thanks to Z and Alex for producing. Thanks to all of you for watching. Talk to you next time in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. Brought to you by Bet Rivers.